They fired the one man who knew everything. After 17 years of loyalty, no warning, no thank you, just clean out your desk. But what they didn't realize was that Jake built the entire system and he didn't leave empty-handed. Stay until the end, because this isn't just a story of betrayal. It's a lesson in quiet revenge. Alan, after 18 years, the company's decided to eliminate your role, my manager said, without even blinking. Please clear your desk by the end of the day. My name is Alan Reeves. I'm 55 years old, and up until that gray Monday morning, I was the senior systems architect at Halstead Dynamics in Cincinnati, Ohio. For nearly 2 decades, I was the spine of that company's IT infrastructure. From floppy disks to full-scale cloud automation, I'd been there through 4 CEOs, 3 building relocations, and 2 mergers. I trained every new face, recovered data no one else could, fixed systems no one understood. And I did it all without demanding a raise, a bonus, or even acknowledgement. So when Troy called me into his office and Laura from HR was already seated, I knew. I'd felt the shift in the air weeks ago. I didn't protest. I just said, understood, and walked out. No begging, no shouting, just calm, cold clarity. Back at my cubicle, I noticed the 20-something programmers, kids I'd mentored, glancing up, then quickly back down at their monitors. Word spreads fast in tech. They were talented, bright even, but none of them truly understood how deep the systems went. None of them knew that the legacy code we still depended on had been hand-built by me, line by line, over nights and weekends. None of them could access the encrypted server logs I'd buried beneath 3 tiers of permissions. I began packing my things with clinical precision, a framed picture of my wife and daughter, a ceramic coffee mug that said, "World's okayest dad," and a scraggly little succulent that had somehow survived 18 years under office lighting. Megan from marketing came over, clearly shaken. "Alan, this is insane. You kept this place running for years." I nodded and gave a polite smile. Companies evolve. But with no notice? After all you've given them? Her voice cracked and people were starting to notice. "It's okay," I said softly, but it wasn't. Not even close. As I headed for the elevator, Troy leaned against his doorway, arms folded, watching like a mall cop, making sure I didn't swipe a stapler on my way out. No thank you, no handshake, just eyes cold with guilt masked as authority. What no one realized, what they never took the time to see, was that I didn't just do my job. I owned every inch of it. Not out of ego, but out of discipline. See, I knew they'd let me go eventually. They always do. But what they never expect is that the quiet ones, the steady, invisible ones, are the ones who hold all the keys. And I had every single one. I had documented everything, thoroughly. Years ago, after a minor data breach, the legal department had quietly asked me to implement audit trails to monitor internal access. So I did. Custom protocols, secure logging, timestamps, IP tracking, encryption, everything. Redundant backups, too. One copy on a local encrypted drive, another in my glove box. As I sat in my car staring up at the 12-story glass and metal shell where I'd spent over half my adult life, I remembered the badge I had just surrendered. It had been renewed 17 times. I turned the key and drove home in silence. They had no idea what Wednesday would bring. I joined Halstead Dynamics back when it was just 2 leased suites in a half-empty tech complex. My daughter, Claire, was 6. Now she was 24, finishing her 2nd year of law school. The company had expanded wildly, and I'd stayed through the ups and downs, turning down headhunters, ignoring better salaries elsewhere. Loyalty, I believed, still meant something. My wife, Rachel, used to joke the data center was my real second home. She wasn't far off. I knew those systems the way a mechanic knows the sound of an engine before it fails. I could tell you which firewall rule was going to conflict before it happened, which legacy function would crash with a new update, and how to bring it all back online with just a laptop and 20 minutes of command line work. I didn't brag, I didn't posture, I just knew. The architecture I built had survived 3 buyouts and 4 CTOs, including one who tried to replace everything with a sleek off-the-shelf platform that nearly collapsed the supply chain system. Daniel, my new boss for the last 5 years, was fresh out of an MBA program when they handed him the title. Polished, sharp suit, fast talker. He referred to us as tech assets, not people. He loved throwing around words like agile, scalable, and synergize. "Welcome back, Mr. Harris," he said, with a different kind of respect. I nodded, stepped into the elevator, and hit the top floor button. I'd never been on the executive level before. Now I was expected. In the boardroom, 10 members sat around a glossy oak table. Robert Chan gave me a subtle nod. The interim CEO, Meredith Vaughn, cleared her throat. "Mr. Harris," she began carefully, "thank you for coming in. The situation you've uncovered is unlike anything we've faced." I said nothing. Let them fill the silence. "Initial audits suggested $3.9 million in questionable vendor contracts," she continued. but as of this morning, the number has climbed to $5.2 million in diverted funds. Legal teams are preparing criminal referrals. Still, I remained quiet. Robert leaned forward. Caleb, the board has voted unanimously. We're creating a new executive position, Chief Information Security Officer, full authority. Your role would report directly to us. I placed a folder on the table and pushed it forward. Those are my conditions. They're non-negotiable. Meredith opened the folder and skimmed the top page. Her eyes widened. Full audit rights across all departments. Final approval on all tech-related expenditures. The ability to suspend vendor contracts at will. That's right, I said. You lost $5 million because no one was paying attention. That ends now. The room was silent for several seconds. You have until noon, I added, heading for the door. I've got other offers. Just before stepping out, Robert asked, "Did you plan all this?" I paused, turned slightly. I didn't plan to be fired after 17 years. Everything after that? I shrugged. That was just me doing what I've always done, spotting vulnerabilities and fixing them. At 11:47 a.m., my phone rang. They had agreed to every condition. 6 months later, I sat in my new office, a sleek corner suite overlooking the Cincinnati skyline, sunlight spilling over a row of framed certifications and a prominently placed sign on my desk. Trust is not a policy, it's a protocol. Brian Layton pled guilty to 6 counts of fraud. He struck a plea deal, but he'd still be spending years in federal prison. Carter Ross, the man who fired me, was still claiming ignorance. His trial was scheduled for the fall, and Jason, the consultant who smiled through it all, gone without a trace. The systems were tighter now, stronger, cleaner. But every now and then, when I sipped coffee at sunrise and looked out at the glass towers, I reminded myself, corporations forget people, but they never forget power shifts. And I had just rewritten the system, permanently. Jacob Preston had fled to Argentina, but was now in the process of being extradited. Most of the stolen funds had been recovered, enough, at least, to keep the company stable and the board's reputation intact. My old team now reported to me, though I had promoted Ethan to oversee the day-to-day technical operations. The kid had real potential, he just needed someone to believe in him. A light knock on my office door pulled me from the screen. Melissa was standing there, smiling. "Lunch?" she asked. I nodded, grabbed my jacket, and walked with her through the newly redesigned tech wing. Conversations paused for a beat, not in fear, but in respect. These people knew what had happened. They knew I could have buried this place under layers of exposure and scandal, but I didn't. I'd chosen to fix what was broken. In the elevator, Melissa gently squeezed my hand. "Are you happy?" I let the question hang for a moment. The fury that had driven me in the early days after being fired was gone. What remained wasn't exactly happiness, but something better. Satisfaction, wholeness. "I'm good," I said. Outside, the crisp October air brushed our faces as we walked toward a nearby cafe. My phone buzzed with a message from Robert Chan. "Board approved your security budget. Full increase. Unanimous vote." I smiled. Slightly. No more pushback, no more politics. Just trust. Melissa noticed my expression. "Good news?" "Just thinking about bridges," I said, slipping the phone back into my pocket. "Some collapse under their own weight. Others, if you rebuild them right, they come back stronger than ever. And this time, I'd built it on steel." Both were for senior leadership roles. Both came with generous signing bonuses. News travels fast in the industry, but I wasn't ready to move on. This wasn't about finding a new title. It was about seeing this through to the end. That night, using credentials that should have been revoked the moment I was let go, but weren't, I logged into Vanguard's email server one last time. Sloppy handoff, Jason. I scheduled an internal message to all board members, set to hit their inboxes at exactly 8 a.m. the following morning. The subject line read, "Before you approve Q2 bonuses, read this." Attached was a comprehensive report. Dates, documents, emails, vendor records, all tied together into one inescapable web. Friday morning broke crisp and quiet. I sat on my porch with a mug of coffee, watching sunlight stretch across the yard. No alarm, no badge, no stress, just the countdown. At exactly 8 a.m., the email triggered. By 8:17, unknown numbers began lighting up my phone. Executive assistants, maybe a few board members themselves. I let them all go to voicemail. At 9 o'clock, the Emergency Finance Committee meeting began. Gerald Langston would be sitting in, envelope in hand, while the board opened their inboxes to the same bomb I'd just delivered. At 9:32, a text from Stephen. "Cops just walked in. Harper and Carter are being questioned in separate rooms. Phillips looks like he's going to be sick." "What did you do?" I didn't reply. The machine was already in motion. By 10:04, I got a call from a blocked number. I picked up. "Mr. Ellison, this is Rachel Greer from Vanguard's legal division. We need you to come in immediately to discuss the information you've shared with our board." "I'm available by phone," I said calmly. "This really needs to happen in person." "No," I interrupted. It doesn't. Everything I know is in the report, and everything I have is backed up securely in multiple locations. If anything happens to me or my family, backup copies will be forwarded to the SEC, IRS, and 3 major newsrooms. Silence followed on the line. Mr. Ellison, Rachel Greer said finally, her tone carefully neutral, the board is taking your findings extremely seriously. Several executives have already been placed on administrative leave while the investigation proceeds. They'd appreciate your continued cooperation. I've already cooperated, I replied. Everything I have is in that report. My part is done. After we disconnected, I drove 25 miles west to a diner in a sleepy town far from downtown Cincinnati. No need to be easily found today. Over lunch, the headlines began popping up. Vanguard Systems executives under scrutiny for financial misconduct. No names yet, but I knew they'd surface soon enough. At 2:03 p.m., my phone rang. It was Gerald Langston. "It's a bloodbath," he said without hesitation. Brady folded after we confronted him, tried to pin it all on Carter, said he was pressured. Carter's denying it all, and Jason? He claims he was just a consultant, no involvement in finance. The board's not buying it. He paused. "We've suspended all 3 pending a full audit." "And the money?" I asked. "Forensics start Monday. Early estimate is over $4.5 million skimmed off over 3 years, possibly more." I nodded quietly to myself. I'd been pretty close. "The board wants to meet with you," Gerald continued. "They're offering a new role, Chief Integrity Officer. You'd report directly to the board, total autonomy." I had considered this outcome, but hearing it still caught me off guard. "I'll think it over," I said. That evening, I told Andrea everything. She sat in silence as I laid it all out. The fraud, the plan, the fallout. When I finished, she asked a single question. "So, what do you want?" I looked out across the backyard we'd raised our kids in. The vengeance was complete. The men who discarded me were now facing justice, stripped of titles, possibly heading for federal indictments. I had my peace. But walking back into that building, after they'd treated me like nothing, wasn't a decision I could take lightly. Could I really do it? Did I even want to? "I need time to think," I told Andrea that night. Eventually, I opened my laptop and typed a single message onto my long-forgotten LinkedIn profile. Never burn bridges. Just let them crumble beneath the weight of their own corruption. I hit post and shut the lid. Within minutes, messages trickled in. Former colleagues, old clients, a few industry contacts I hadn't heard from in years. Word was already spreading. The quiet IT guy had just toppled 3 executives without ever raising his voice. By Monday, the entire corporate world would know who they had underestimated. At 8 a.m. sharp, I walked through the glass doors of Halverson Dynamics in a suit I hadn't worn since my daughter's graduation. The front desk security guard blinked twice before printing my badge. Besides, I had a feeling the board would be very interested in a shell company called Redstone Consulting, and the little detail that its listed owner happened to be your brother-in-law. The sharp breath on the other end of the line told me I'd hit the target. "You're making a serious mistake," Nolan said finally, his voice tight. "This can still be resolved. A generous severance package, glowing references, whatever you want." "Goodbye, Nolan," I said, and hung up. 10 minutes later, Lisa from HR emailed again. My severance offer had suddenly doubled, now with a hefty non-disclosure agreement attached. They were panicking, but they still thought this was about money. They had no clue how deep this went. That night, I barely slept. I spent hours combing through archived data, connecting pieces I hadn't thought to look at before. And what I found confirmed everything, and more. Redstone wasn't Nolan's first side hustle. Nearly 3 years earlier, right after his promotion to CFO, another pattern emerged. Payments labeled as strategic consultation were being sent to a firm named Glacier Ridge Solutions. The invoices were vague, bloated, and always just under the approval threshold for a secondary review. No one looked too closely, but I did. Glacier Ridge, as it turned out, was registered to Elaine Harper, Nolan's wife. She was listed as CEO of a company that had no staff, no real address, and not even a working phone number, but the trail didn't stop there. While digging through internal email archives, I found something damning. Marcus Carter, my former boss, wasn't just aware of the Glacier and Redstone payments. He'd helped clear the way for them. In return, his department saw budget increases year after year, while others were quietly slashed. The previous department director, forced into early retirement after questioning discrepancies in IT expenditures. Then came Jason Phillips, the so-called consultant brought in to modernize operations. His firm was awarded the contract through a closed-door approval process that bypassed procurement entirely. His real job wasn't to improve IT. It was to dismantle the infrastructure I'd built and quietly remove the one person who knew where all the data bodies were buried, me. The fraud was smart. On paper, services were being rendered. Software licenses, maintenance contracts, consultation hours, everything looked real, just grossly inflated. It was a perfect gray area crime. Auditors looking for outright embezzlement would miss it. Over the course of 3 years, they'd funneled nearly $4.3 million through ghost firms and padded vendors, all while cutting corners on actual operations. And they thought I'd just go away. Not a chance. I compiled everything into a meticulous report, spreadsheets mapping the payment escalations, business registrations linking the companies to Nolan Harper's extended family, archived emails proving Marcus Carter's knowledge and cooperation. But instead of going public or tipping off the media, I made a more strategic move. I reached out to someone they wouldn't see coming. Gerald Langston, a semi-retired board member I had worked with years ago during a sensitive network overhaul. Gerald picked up on the second ring. "Jack Ellison," he said, his voice warm. "Heard you left Vanguard Systems. That true?" "Not exactly voluntarily," I said. "Gerald, I need 15 minutes of your time. I think you'll want to hear this." There was a pause. "Is this why Nolan and Marcus looked like they hadn't slept in a week at yesterday's meeting?" "Probably." He let out a dry laugh. "Always figured you were the guy who knew where everything was hidden. Where can we meet?" 1 hour later, we were sitting on a bench at Memorial Park, 3 miles from corporate headquarters. I handed him a sealed envelope with a printed report and a flash drive. "It's all in there. Transactions, vendor ties, internal approvals. I'm not looking for my job back. I'm not seeking a payout. I just want the right people to see what's been going on." Gerald eyed me carefully. "Why me?" "Because I remember you actually reading through compliance reports when no one else bothered. You ask the right questions and you don't brush off red flags." He nodded slowly. "There's a finance committee emergency session tomorrow morning. Perfect timing, Jack." He slipped the envelope into his briefcase. "If this holds up, heads are going to roll." That's the idea. I was halfway back to my car when my phone buzzed. A message from Andrea. "A man named Jason Phillips just came to the house asking for you. Said it was urgent. I told him you weren't home." That's what Andrea texted when Jason Carter had the nerve to show up at our front door, unannounced, asking for me. They were panicking now. Good. That same afternoon, I received 2 unsolicited job offers, one from Nexus Data Corporation, another from Aegis Tech Solutions. Curious, I pulled the incorporation records for Lancer Edge. The registered agent? Nolan Harper. A few quick keystrokes later, and his LinkedIn profile confirmed what I already suspected. He was Martin's brother-in-law. They were funneling company money through inflated service charges, disguising theft as routine business. I leaned back in my chair and felt something settle in my chest. Not rage, just a cold clarity. For nearly 2 decades, I'd been the guy who held things together, quietly, efficiently, never asked for credit, never made noise. And this is how they repaid that loyalty, by kicking me out just before their scheme could unravel. My phone lit up with a message from Evan, a junior tech I'd mentored since his internship. "I heard. What they did to you is wrong. Phillips is already in your old office." I stared at the screen, then placed it face down. Everything made sense now. Marcus and Keller needed me gone to avoid any risk of exposure. They assumed I'd vanish quietly, that I was just some relic from the old systems era who didn't know how things worked anymore. They had no idea who they were messing with. I opened my email and began typing a message to the board of directors, but paused. If I came at them directly, they'd chalk it up to resentment, maybe even bury it. I didn't want noise. I wanted results. I deleted the draft. I didn't need revenge. I needed a controlled detonation, one they couldn't stop once it was set off. Tomorrow was Thursday, quarterly board meeting. Perfect. I spent the evening setting up a plan. My burner account, built years ago for internal security testing, looked like a real internal Meridian address, but it sat outside the directory structure, invisible unless you knew where to look. At 8:57 a.m. the next morning, I parked across from Meridian HQ and watched through the windshield as the building filled with life. In the passenger seat, my laptop waited, screen open, the draft message ready. At precisely 9:12 a.m., I hit send. Subject line, financial anomalies. Immediate attention required. The email went straight to Marcus Caldwell, our CEO, and copied 3 senior board members. It listed 5 payments to Lancer Edge Consulting, with amounts and approval timestamps. Clean, precise, provable. I deliberately left Nolan Harper's identity out of it, let Marcus and the others connect those dots themselves, and panic. Let them start asking the right questions. That's when things would unravel. If Carter wasn't involved, he'd launch an investigation. If he was, panic would follow. Either way, I'd get answers. By 9:47 a.m., my phone buzzed. Incoming call from Marcus. I let it go to voicemail. His message was curt and sharp. "Logan, we need to talk about your email. Immediately. Call me." I didn't. Instead, I grabbed a black coffee from a place near the river and set up shop at a back table, laptop open, VPN running. At 10:32, another email landed. This one from Lisa Hargrave in HR. "Mr. Brooks, we've received a disturbing communication from you that may breach your separation terms. Please cease all contact with Monroe Systems employees and be advised of your ongoing confidentiality obligations. Further action may result in legal escalation." So, that was the play. Intimidation. Bury the whistleblower. One problem, I'd never signed any separation document. At noon, I visited my bank and opened my old safe deposit box. Inside was a weathered flash drive, older than the rest, but it held the gold, access logs, security audit files, credentials matrices, everything from the original system I'd designed back when the company was small enough to fit on one floor. And there it was. 18 months earlier, a permission change signed off by CFO Nolan Harper himself. The very week the payments to Ellison Consulting began. Back home, 3 missed calls blinked on my screen. Marcus, Lisa, and unexpectedly, Jason Phillips. That last one was interesting. I wasn't sure he'd even break a sweat this early. I checked my personal email. One unread message from Evan, flagged urgent. Logan, people are saying you accused the execs of fraud. Jason just pulled everyone into a meeting. They're revoking your legacy access, even archived stuff. We're all on edge. What's happening? The kid meant well. I replied simply, don't say anything, just observe. At 2:58 p.m., the landline rang, a number I hadn't used for years. I answered, didn't speak. Logan, it's Nolan Harper. His voice was cool, measured. We should talk about what you think you've uncovered. I believe there's been a misunderstanding. Is that what you're calling it now? I asked. A pause. Look, these transitions are never easy. If you've got concerns, the board is the appropriate forum. Already considered that. Let's not make this bigger than it is, he continued. Why don't we meet privately tomorrow? Off the radar. We can sort it out. Tomorrow won't work, I said, and hung up. At first, I tried to help him understand the real landscape, the spaghetti of legacy code, the undocumented patches, the fragile integrations that held our systems together like digital duct tape. But he wasn't interested in listening. He wanted dashboards, not depth. Optics over function. And now, he'd cut loose the one person who could actually hold it all together. That, I realized, was going to be his real mistake. We need to future-proof, he'd say during meetings, eyes skimming right past me like I wasn't even in the room. About 7 months ago, he brought in some shiny consultant named Tyler Manning. Slick haircut, $1,000 blazer, and a Stanford MBA screaming from every corner of his LinkedIn. Tyler didn't even try to hide his intentions. They'd disappear into conference rooms with frosted glass, talking in hushed tones that fell silent the second I walked by. Around the same time, I noticed something odd. Subtle changes to my access permissions. Nothing overt, just a few toggles here and there. Admin rights revoked on old systems I personally wrote. Legacy credentials reassigned. I could have raised hell. But instead, I did what they never expected. I observed. I documented. Rachel, my wife, noticed something was off one night while we sat out on the back deck. You've been quiet lately. Trouble at work? I took a sip from my bottle and offered a tired smile. Just the usual. Corporate evolution. But I knew better. The silence wasn't passive. It was strategic. I was being iced out, little by little. Project briefs stopped landing in my inbox. Key update meetings moved without me. Tasks I would have been trusted with 5 years ago were being handed to fresh-out-of-college hires who couldn't tell a SQL injection from a stapler. Then came the nail in the coffin, an internal memo forwarded to me by mistake from an old friend in legal. It outlined a total overhaul of our department, new leadership, new structure, and at the center, Tyler Manning. My role? Gone. Not reassigned. Not renamed. Just omitted entirely. That same day, I found something else. Something they probably thought no one would ever look at. See, while running one of my routine, no one cares anymore security sweeps, an old habit of mine, I picked up on irregular financial activity, quiet, recurring payments from one of our enterprise accounts. The recipient, a company called Bright Core Technologies. Sounded official, but it was registered just last year, and the listed office. A P.O. box and a strip mall UPS store on the edge of Dayton. Curious, I traced the digital signatures. Slow at first, careful, then I saw it. The payment history started shortly after Tyler was hired. Tiny transfers at first, a few hundred here, then thousands, growing steadily like they were testing the system to see who'd notice. No one did. Except me. I didn't say a word, just compiled the data, encrypted it, backed it up twice, because sometimes, being the quiet one with a long memory and a key to every digital closet is the most dangerous position in the room. The morning after they pushed me out, I sat alone in my office at home, laptop open, systems humming. The company thought I was gone, but I hadn't even started, and if they thought they could steal from me and bury me with a generic severance package, well, Wednesday was going to be a very long day for them. No alarm clock buzzing, no rush hour traffic waiting, just silence and the heavy awareness of everything that had just unraveled. Rachel quietly placed a cup of coffee beside me before heading out. I'll be at the store for a while. Need anything? She asked gently. I shook my head. After nearly 2 decades of marriage, she knew when I needed to be alone with my thoughts. Once the door clicked shut, I reached into the locked drawer of my desk and pulled out a small flash drive, one of a few I had stashed away over the years. Official policy strictly forbade employees from taking proprietary data off-site, but years ago, when the legal department requested a contingency audit trail for insider threats, I'd explained the need for mirrored, encrypted backups. They approved it in writing, then forgot it ever existed. I plugged the drive into my laptop and began digging. Logs, private communications, board meeting transcripts I was never meant to see. And then it hit me. Dozens of consistent payments to a vendor I hadn't recalled authorizing, Lancer Edge Consulting LLC. Over $1.7 million routed across 17 months. The deeper I went, the clearer the pattern became. The payments were tied to our enterprise-wide licensing contracts, licenses that I had helped negotiate in years past. Except now, the invoices were padded, sometimes by 12%, other times 22%, just enough to skate under radar. I cross-referenced the payment logs with timestamps on internal approvals. Every single one had been greenlit by our CFO, Martin Keller.